Hey everyone, let me start by saying something that everyone already knows. These are really strange times. So I hope that you and your families are all safe and sound. In reality, all of us are experiencing change and uncertainty and some kind of ambiguity right now, and it's really scary. But actually, in the HR community, I think you already know we're not alone. The last few weeks have shown how everyone has come together to share knowledge and experience and ultimately to share their kindness. Uh, Already, I've been in a few situations where I've had to reach out to my ex bosses, my HR mentors for advice. And that advice has always come freely and it's come promptly. But actually, for me, from a professional point of view, these times are not so strange. I've been recruiting remotely for almost a decade. I've been hiring more than 30 countries from right here in Malaysia. I often never meet my candidates or hiring managers face to face. I've been involved multiple times in hiring country startup teams that no one in my company meets until after they've been hired. So I hope that you will find what I have to say useful today. And we're going to be talking specifically about recruiting remotely, or as I like to call it, hiring from your sofa. So I've split today into 12 different subjects. What is your situation? Get everything you need before you need it. How have you been recruiting in the past and does it still work? What the heck is a culture playbook? Take remote control of the job brief and hiring process. Video interviewing checklist. What you must know about any candidate. Getting offers accepted and making sure they turn up on the first day. Keep your successful candidates close, but your rejected candidates closer. What does a recruiter do when there's no recruiting to do? Don't let your team die, and always share the love. Okay, let's get started. What is your situation? I don't know how many times I've spoken to recruitment teams or consulted with recruitment teams, and no one can tell me how many roles are open, what stage those roles are at, and how those roles are prioritized. It's almost unbelievable, but I see it so many times. And you need to know these things because you need to make a plan. There's so much change happening around us, even when we're not in the current situation with Corona. Things change so fast within companies, and you need to know what's happening. Time is the most important thing for a recruiter. There's never enough hours in the day to do what we need to do. So don't waste any of it. So the first thing you need to know is how many roles you have open, if any. And we're going to talk about what to do if you've got no roles later. Um, are any of these positions frozen or cancelled? Are there any plans to freeze hiring? What stage is each role at? What positions are the most urgent? Okay, step one, quick communication channels. Absolutely essential if you're going to be recruiting in a situation like we are now. It's so easy for communication to break down, and you can end up working on a role which was actually cancelled 2 weeks ago, but nobody told you. Recruiters are very often the last people to find out, so make sure you have very quick, open communication channels with your CEO, your hiring managers, your head of HR. You need to know what's happening. Otherwise, you're just going to end up wasting time and wasting candidates' times as well. So once you have those quick communication channels, you can move on to step number two, building a correct and detailed hiring list. You can have your list of open positions in Excel or Google Sheets, but if you want a system that is going to track these positions in real time, record everything that's happening with those positions, you really need a good quality applicant tracking system. Of course, BrioHR has a fantastic applicant tracking system. And once you have that, you can move on to step number three, which is, of course, build a flexible action plan. And it does need to be flexible as things are going to be changing so quickly. But there's no use jumping in and just trying to recruit. You need to have an action plan. You need to prioritize the positions. You need to distribute them correctly to your recruiters in your team and the various recruitment channels that you have. Action plan is absolutely essential. And step four, you know what? Recruitment, whatever I tell you here, recruitment is 90% hard work. Most of the time, you just need to get off your butts and work hard. Right. Get everything you need before you need it. So this will be a really quick one. Most of it's obvious, but it's good to have it restated. I've got a really weak memory, so I tend to write everything on my hand. Here we go. So you need a laptop, absolutely essential, a phone, chargers, internet connection. LinkedIn Recruitment Seat is the most important tool you can have. Video calling software, hey, it doesn't really matter which one. There's so many and they're all good. An applicant tracking system, coffee, you need it, and job boards. So with these things, I can recruit from any country in the world for any other country in the world. This is absolutely all you need. You don't need a desk, you don't need a printer, you don't need these things, you don't even need a landline. You've got everything you need here. And to be honest, the bottom two, coffee and job boards, they're not even essential. But wait, there is one more thing. You need to hustle. I said it before, 90% of recruitment is hard work. You just need to hustle. That's why I tattooed it to the back of my hand. Hustle is the most important thing. Great. So how have you been recruiting in the past? And is it still working? Right now is actually a really good time to reassess what you have been doing and what you should be doing in the future. There's a big trend away from job boards at the moment. Employer branding and social media presence are really taking over, and I have to 100% agree with that. Of course, most people are on their mobiles these days, and one of the number one tools you have as a recruiter is your LinkedIn profile. And if you're lucky enough to have a LinkedIn recruiter seat, that really replaces everything else. It's such an amazing tool in terms of being able to aggressively headhunt and target the candidates that you want, but also being able to reach those candidates with your employer brand. Of course, employer brand is absolutely essential these days, and you can use it for free on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you think who your perfect candidate, you should be targeting the best person to do that role in the country, right? And that person is likely not on a job board. If they are the best person for the role, they're probably already in a great company, they're doing well, and they're not really looking to leave. So there's no point looking for that person on a job board. You have to create an employer brand, and you have to use these social media channels to try and tempt that person into actually considering your company for their career. And you know whatever channels you do use, a lot of people don't agree with me on social media and they want to stick to job boards. But whatever channels you do use, you really have to step back and judge them. And there's a few criteria that I recommend you use. One is speed. How quickly does it get you the candidates that you want? One is quality. Of course, how good are the people that you're getting from that channel? And of course, the last is cost. Speed, quality, cost. I think they're the most important criteria or metrics to judge your recruitment channels by. One often overlooked recruitment channel is an employee referral program. Sounds simple, but so many companies do not tap into this channel, and most studies show that employee referrals tend to be much higher quality and also tend to stay with the company much longer. So for an employee referral program to really work and add value to what you're doing, it needs to be attractive. The rewards need to incentivize your employee enough to get off their butts and send their CVs to you. It needs to be visible. So actually, a lot of companies do have employee referral programs, but their employees simply don't know about it. Or if they do know about it, they don't know what positions are open, and they don't know how to actually refer a CV. It needs to be regular. Again, you can't just blast something out once a year. You need to be updating employees on a weekly basis about what positions are open, what positions you would like to receive referrals for, and again, really regularly telling people about what the rewards are. And lastly, it needs to be trackable. One of the biggest complaints about employee referral programs are that an employee gives a CV to the recruitment team and it's like going to a black hole. They never hear about it again. So it needs to be trackable. You need to be able to know what's happening with those referrals and the success of those referrals, and also which employees are the most likely to refer candidates. And finally, if you want to revisit how you recruit, you're going to need to look at your processes. I have a love-hate relationship with processes. If you're in payroll, it's great to have processes. You do X, Y, Z, and you've done your job. You just follow the process and it's done. Recruitment isn't that simple. There's so many variables. There's so many human decisions that you're not in control of. Having a process often gets in the way. Typically, processes are very task-orientated, and recruitment is not a task-orientated role. It's results-orientated. So processes are always important. They're there to make sure that everyone is doing things in a repeatable way and a compliant way. But you really do have to look at your processes and make sure they are orientated towards results and not tasks. And if they're getting in the way, then you have to take action. You have to change those processes. A lot of processes were written by someone who probably wasn't a recruiter and probably 5, 10, 15 years ago. And they're just not relevant, but people stick to them because they're there and they think because it's a recorded process that they're unchangeable. Well, they're not. If it's not working for you, you have to take ownership and you have to change it. So what the heck is a culture playbook? It's fairly simple. A culture playbook is a definition of what your culture is. This is super important, and again, people often trivialize it or overlook it. Having a well-defined explanation of what your culture is absolutely necessary in modern day recruiting. I've spoken to so many recruiters about candidates, and they say this candidate is a culture fit, this candidate is not a culture fit. I'm sure you look at ways of interviewing candidates for culture fit within your own companies. And often they say these things, and I ask them, can you give me a definition of culture fit? And they can't. They're interviewing someone for culture fit when they can't actually define what culture fit is. And so what they're actually doing is essentially just saying whether or not they like the candidate. And it comes down to something as simple as that. They're not interviewing for culture fit, even though they think they are. They're interviewing for people that would make good friends for them. So you absolutely need to be able to define your culture. And I read an article by Jack Daly, which really helped me in terms of how you go about defining your culture. And he broke it down into 4 key areas. The first one is recognition. How do you give recognition to your employees? Really think about your company and think how you do define recognition and how you give recognition. Is it consistent? Is it regular? Think about it and kind of get something down on paper. How do you communicate? Whether it's with colleagues, teammates, or even externally, how you communicate is a big part of your culture. So you really need to understand that also. You need to know and understand about how you do empower your employees. Of course, this can be very, very different between teams, so it becomes quite complicated. But empowerment is a huge part of culture. So you really need to be able to articulate how your company does give empowerment. And lastly, development. Always big on the HR agenda. How does your company give personal and professional development to your employees? And if you can really talk articulately and accurately about these 4 things, then you're well on your way to having a very good culture playbook. And the benefits of having a culture playbook, again, I read an article by Shelby Jones who really articulates well why you should be interested in having a culture playbook. It essentially helps you attract and retain. If you're really heavily relying on your employer brand to be able to attract good staff, it has to be based on your culture. You can't just tell nice stories about having beanbags and free lunches and things like this. Your employer brand has to be based around your culture. Therefore, you have to have an accurate definition of your culture. And once you do have an accurate definition of your culture and your employer brand is building on that, you're obviously going to attract better employees. But those employees are going to be employees that want to be part of your culture. And so you're obviously going to be able to retain them better. It helps to unite employees. It helps to identify the right behaviors, but also the negative behaviors that are counteractive to your culture. It helps to be able to incentivize culture champions and have ambassadors of your culture if you have that definition of what it is. It's really important to create rituals. Whether it's in some companies I've worked for, it's the way you shake hands or it's certain words that you use. But having these certain rituals, again, defined by your culture, really create a sense of unity and a sense of community in a company. And once you can define your culture, of course, it means you're able to invoke it much more often and in a more methodical way. So these are really the benefits of having a culture playbook. And assuming most of you listening to this are recruiters, some of you will be lucky enough to have other people within the HR team who focus on the culture side. Others may not. But I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, that's not my job. And you're right. In large companies, there should be other teams that focus on building these kind of internal cultures. And in many cases, it shouldn't even be an HR role. It should be a C-level role. But actually, if it's not being done, you should do it regardless of who you are. It's, as a recruiter, it's going to help you so much. It's going to reduce attrition, which is going to reduce the number of roles you have to work on. But it's also just going to help you attract the right type of candidate very, very quickly. Christine Song sums it up really, really well. She makes it very, very simple. Define it, share it, own it. She makes it sound like a Beyonce song, but however it sounds, having a culture playbook will really help you on the recruitment path. Take remote control of the job brief and the hiring process. Wow, I don't know how many times I've worked with hiring managers and they give me a couple of lines for a job description and think that I can find them the perfect candidate from that and nothing else. It's absolutely not true. You need to have a very, very detailed job brief. You need to understand everything about the position, and you need to be in control of the hiring process. So just to give you a kind of idea of what I look for when I'm trying to get a job brief, these are the questions that I ask. There's 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages. I'm not going to go through the exact process I do right now. I've written an ebook about taking a job brief, and you can go and find it there. But there's so many questions that you need to have answered by the hiring manager. You need to get them to give you their time, and you need to fully understand every detail about the job brief. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to find the right candidate. It's like shooting a gun with no ammunition. There's nothing's going to happen. So you need to fully understand the role. And to give you an example, I'm sure you've been in this situation where you've been given a job description and you find a candidate who absolutely fits the job description perfectly. And then he meets the hiring manager, and the hiring manager thinks they're a complete mismatch. And that's not the recruiter's fault. That's because the job description bears no relevance to the job itself. It was written 5-10 years ago, and it's just been used over and over again, and the position has changed and changed and changed since the job description was written. So don't rely on these old, outdated job descriptions. Create your own job description and teach yourself how to take a job brief properly. And that really starts with being able to change your attitude. A lot of recruiters think that the hiring manager is the boss, as in it's his position, so he is in charge of recruitment. He's not. You are. It's your job. You're the recruiter, so you need to change your attitude and realize that you are the one who's in charge, and that you are the one who sets how to take a job brief and the hiring process. And you do need to take control. Hiring managers will really try and take control and tell you how to recruit. And if they do that, then they can go away and recruit themselves. If they want you to recruit, you have to take control and you have to tell them how it's going to happen. Absolutely important. You need to train your interviewers. So a lot of interviewers will not be experienced. They don't really know how to interview. And you will lose a lot of candidates because of that. A lot of hiring managers and other people involved in the interview process just don't know how to treat candidates. They're often quite rude. They think that because they're in charge of the interview, they have to dominate the interview, and they really upset candidates. So you have to make sure that you train your interview. Again, it's your hiring process. So if you're taking control of the hiring process, you're also taking responsibility for it. So it's your responsibility to make sure that you've trained the other interviewers in the hiring process. You need to plan the interview process. And of course, the hiring manager should have a certain amount of control over how many steps there are and what kind of assessments there are. But actually, you need to make sure that you have overall oversight. For example, it's very common for there to be 4 or 5 interviews and for the candidate to be able to be asked the same questions over and over again. It's absolutely terrible. It's a waste of time for everyone involved. So you need to sit down with all the interviewers in the process and kind of divide and conquer and decide who is going to ask the candidate what, who is going to focus on what area of the candidate's experience, and make sure that the candidate doesn't have 5 identical interviews. Make sure that every interview focuses on a particular area that is not overlapping. Use scorecards. Scorecards are the best way to standardize interviewing across the company. Again, candidates who would have been rejected by one interviewer are hired by another interviewer. Having scorecards that really regiment how candidates are assessed is super important. And again, that's why an applicant tracking system comes in very handy, where you can very easily use scorecards and track the success of candidates against predetermined questions. And finally, share feedback every day. Again, I talked about having open communication channels to create accurate hiring lists, but really, even in the process of an individual role, you need to have open communication channels so that you can share feedback. When you interview a candidate, you should share that feedback straight away with the rest of the interviewers. You should be able to tell them areas where you're not sure and that you want them to focus on, or areas where you feel someone is very, very strong, because that's going to influence how they interview the candidate. So very, very important. Okay, and on to video interview checklist. This is often overlooked again, especially when you're working from home. There's certain simple things that if you're not in the office and you're out of your natural rhythm, that you just forget to do. So creating an interview checklist or a video interviewing checklist of everything that needs to be done prior to the interview and during the interview, it really helps concentrate your thoughts and make sure that you don't screw things up. So the first one, super obvious: email invite to the candidate and hiring manager. And to be honest with you, this is one that I have screwed up many times. As in, I phoned the candidate, I've spoken to the hiring manager, I've got a time, and I verbally told them of the time, and then I forget to send them an email because I'm busy doing other stuff, and the interview doesn't happen. It's a major screw up, but it happens because it's just a slip of mind. So having a checklist, and the first thing on that checklist is to make sure you send an email invite. But especially in these times of video interviews, make sure you explicitly explain how to enter the video interview. A lot of people aren't savvy on these video calls. They need to know if there's a certain software to download beforehand, and they need to know how to enter the call. Very, very important to include those things. And send WhatsApp follow-ups to the candidate hiring manager. Again, these days, everyone's on WhatsApp, everyone's on Slack, there's all these other tools. Less and less people regularly check their email. So when you send an email invite, make sure you follow that up with a WhatsApp to the candidate and hiring manager, just saying that you've sent the email invite. But don't limit it to just that one WhatsApp. You should also send them a WhatsApp on the morning of the interview. And again, I'll give you an example of why that's important. I've set up interviews for, let's say, at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. These are face-to-face interviews, but the same applies for a video interview. At 3:55, the candidate shows up, and I go to find the hiring manager, only to find that they called in sick that morning, but nobody told me. And so, of course, the candidate is there, but the hiring manager isn't. Terrible experience for the candidate and very annoying for the recruiter. It could have all been solved if the hiring manager had just WhatsApped me in the morning saying that they're sick and can they reschedule. So very important to send that message. And if you're talking about a video interview, you should also WhatsApp the hiring manager and the candidate just 5 minutes before the interview is supposed to take place, and make sure that they've remembered and that they've got everything that they need. WhatsApp, again, super, super valuable tool, much better than email. Charge your devices and keep chargers handy. Again, super, super simple, but one that we all forget. We get halfway through a call, halfway through a video interview, and then we realize that our phone is running dead, or our laptop is out of batteries. So make sure you charge your devices, make sure you keep the chargers handy. Put it in the email invite. Remind the candidate to make sure that all their devices are charged. You'd be surprised how often that catches people out. Webcam positioning. So I interviewed a candidate once who, for the first 5 minutes of the interview, spent that time moving the webcam around and trying to find an angle that made her look good. It was super, super annoying because I was trying to ask her questions about her experience, and she didn't really seem to be concentrating. She seemed to be more interested in getting that angle right and getting the lighting right. It was super annoying for me. So I would guess if you're a candidate and the hiring manager is doing the same thing, or the recruiter is doing the same thing, that it would be super annoying for the candidate. So make sure you have things set up before you enter into the call. If it's important to you, some people just jump in and don't care how they look. But don't be screwing around and moving around and trying to get things ready. You should be ready before the call. Internet connection, that's a tough one. You need to have a good internet connection, but ultimately it can be out of your control. It doesn't matter how good your internet connection is, or how much you pay, or which service provider you use. Sometimes it can just go down. Sometimes you just need to cross your fingers and kind of pray to the god of Wi-Fi that it's going to work. But because it is out of your control, you need to have a backup plan. So most people have their home internet, but they also have their mobile data. So have a backup plan to switch onto your mobile. But even that sometimes doesn't work. So make sure you always have the candidate's phone number in your phone. A lot of people do just rely on email and go into the call, but make sure you have it on your phone so that you can just call them using an old-fashioned telephone call or an old-fashioned SMS, and tell them that your internet connection is down and you might have to reschedule. Don't leave them hanging. Have a backup plan. It makes you look more professional. So once you're in the interview, again, simple things. You need to be smiling and you need to talk casually for a few minutes. Video interviewing can be quite intimidating. People aren't used to it. I've been doing it for 10 years, but I still don't really enjoy it. I find it uncomfortable, even though I do it so much. So do smile with the candidate and talk casually for a few minutes and make them relax. It's super important that you make them feel comfortable. It's super important that you make them like you, and you need to gain their trust. If you're talking about culture fit, you're going to be asking them so many personal questions, really digging deep. And if you don't make them comfortable and like you and kind of gain their trust, they're simply not going to divulge the information that you want, and you're not going to get as much from the interview as you can. So again, it's super, super important to do these things. You also need to always be selling. It's a really competitive market out there for the best candidates. They get multiple offers, and as I said before, a lot of them aren't actually looking for a job. You've just used your employer brand to tempt them into coming for an interview. So you need to always be selling. You need to be upselling the company from the very first telephone call to the video interviews. You need to be selling why they should be joining the company from the very first go. And you need to be able to train your interviewers on this point. I mentioned training your interviewers before, but the interviewer needs to know about making them comfortable and making them like you and gaining their trust. Again, if you're taking control of the interview process, you're also taking responsibility for it, and part of that is making sure your interviewers know how to interview and can sell the company. Okay, what you must know about any candidate. I know a lot of recruiters try to do very in-depth technical interviews, but one thing you've got to realize is that you're not a subject matter expert, you're a recruiter. The hiring manager and the other interviews are the subject matter experts. You only really need to find out a little bit about their technical abilities and make sure that they meet certain requirements. Most of your interview should focus on other areas. You need to know about what is their expected salary. You need to know what they think their market worth is, and these two things are slightly different. It's very easy to tell someone that their market worth is a little bit different at the moment. It's a little bit harder to tell someone that no, your expected salary is crazy. So do ask them both those questions. What do they like about their current role, their company, their boss? What don't they like about their current role and their company and their boss? What would they do if they get a counter offer, and why? What are their long-term career and life goals? And there's many more questions along these kind of lines that you can ask them. But really what you're trying to get is a little bit more info about their push factors and their pull factors. And I mentioned earlier about always be selling. In order to do that, you really have to understand their push factors and their pull factors. So very quickly, their push factors are the reasons that they want to leave their current job. Whether it's a bad boss or a certain culture that they don't like, these are reasons that are pushing them out of their current company. Pull factors are the opposite. Pull factors are are factors that are going to pull them towards your company. What kind of boss are they looking for? What kind of role are they looking for? These are the things which are pulling them towards your company or another company. So you really, really need to understand them in order to tailor your sales pitch to these people. But it also helps you eliminate candidates. Sometimes you're interviewing a candidate and they say what they don't like about their current job, and you realize that actually it will be very similar in for the job in your company, and you have to tell them, and you have to be truthful and say, hey, you know what, that's going to be very, very similar here. We have this a very similar culture here. You need to give them that information so that they can make decisions themselves. So understanding their push factors is really important to be able to sell, but also to be able to be truthful and eliminate candidates who might be perfect for the job, but are not going to enjoy working in your company. Pull factors are even more important and give me a huge sense of kind of personal satisfaction, really understanding what the candidate wants, not just out of the job, but out of their career, out of their life. What are their long-term goals? It's so satisfying when you do hire someone and you see them grow and you see them develop and you see them start hitting those career goals and life goals that they told you about when you interviewed them. It's one of the most satisfying things about being a recruiter. If you're in recruitment for money, you're probably in the wrong job. There's not a lot of money in recruitment, but getting a sense of happiness from seeing people succeed, seeing people do well, and knowing that you were a part of that is enormously satisfying. So understanding those push factors and pull factors is not only important for recruitment, but also for your own sense of achievement in knowing that you're making a difference in people's lives. And on to getting offers accepted and making sure they turn up on their first day. I mean, wow, how many candidates have you got to offer stage and they've declined? So frustrating when you put so much work in and arrange I don't know how many interviews, and you give them an offer and they decline the offer. Super, super frustrating. But even worse is when they accept and then after their notice period they don't turn up on the first day, or during the notice period they call you and say, do you know what, I've been made a counter offer, I got a better offer from another company, and you're back to square one. After all the excitement of having an offer accepted, suddenly you're back to stage one, and it really rips your heart apart. So there's a few quick things that you can do to really increase your chances of getting an offer accepted and making sure that they turn up. Really getting those conversion rates up. So the first thing is interviewer contact. Throughout the process of the interview, you need to be always selling, as I mentioned, but not just you, the interviewers as well. The more contact, the more positive communication you can have with the candidate, the more likely they are to accept the offer. You're building a relationship with them throughout the whole process. You shouldn't just be focusing on getting the offer accepted at the end. It should be the first thing on your mind when you speak to a good candidate. And yourself and the interviewers should always be following up with the candidate, saying, "Hey, it was really great to meet you over the interview. Hopefully we can talk again soon." Just simple little messages like this after interviews, really making the candidate feel as if they have made a positive mark, and start to make them feel part of the company already, part of the company community. So make sure your interviewers are sending them follow-up WhatsApps or emails, just saying thanks for coming to the interview. Make sure you have a wrap-up call. Really, really important before you make the offer. Don't go straight from the final interview to the offer. You need to call the candidate after the interview and find out how they feel. They'll feel very different at the beginning of the interview than how they feel at the end of the interview process. So you need to call them and find out how they feel about the role now that they've met 3, 4, 5 people, now that they understand the role fully. How do they feel about the role? And also about their salary. You should have asked them in the first interview what was their salary and their expected salary, but now they know more about the role, and that could have changed, or the interview process could have taken 2 or 3 weeks. They could have got other offers, and their expectations should have changed. So make sure you have a wrap-up call and find out as much as possible before taking it to an actual offer. And when you do make the offer, don't do it over email, don't do it over WhatsApp. Get on another call with them and make the offer verbally, and so that you can see their face and how they react. And once you get to that stage, if you've done the wrap-up call correctly, you should know whether or not they're going to accept the offers. If you've done the whole process correctly, you should know what their push factors are, what their pull factors are. In the wrap-up call, you should be asking them one simple question, which is, what is the magic number that would make you accept? So when your rewards team actually gives you an offer to give to the candidate, you should already know if they're going to accept it or not. You've actually already done all your negotiation before the offer is made. Throughout the whole process, you're understanding what they want, and you're telling them what you have, and you know exactly what money they're expecting. So if you've done your wrap-up call correctly, and if you've done the whole process correctly, when you make the offer over a video call, you should already know what the outcome should be, or whether or not they will accept. But things do happen, so you do have to be prepared for negotiation. Sometimes it's good to hold back on salary. If the rewards team gives you a very attractive amount, sometimes it's good to hold a little bit back, so you've got room to negotiate just in case. But what happens when, after they do accept? How do you make sure that candidate is going to turn up on the first day, or isn't going to pull out of the offer? And there's a whole host of things that you can do here during that onboarding process to, again, make the candidate more likely to turn up on the first day. You've got to keep them warm. Just as I said during the interview process, that the interviewer should be contacting them, that shouldn't change in the onboarding period, in their notice period. You need to keep them warm. You need to be dropping them messages, painting pictures about how their first day will be, how things are going. I think simple things like this, painting pictures to make them feel like they're already part of the company. You need to be able to send them welcome emails, but more importantly, it should be coming from someone senior in your company, even the CEO. Having a welcome video, a recording by your CEO saying hello to candidates and welcoming them to the company, super important. Again, it just makes the candidate feel like they're already part of the company. Someone so senior is sending them a message. Definitely makes a huge impact on having those conversion rates as high as possible. Assign them a buddy. Having a buddy in the company, someone who's going to look after you on your first day or two, is super reassuring. So you should be assigning a buddy, an onboarding buddy, to all of your new joiners. Get the buddy to send them a message during the notice period saying they're looking forward to meeting them and helping them through their first few days. Get the hiring manager to call them regularly, talking about what's been happening in the team since they last spoke, giving them any updates, and telling them about what's going to happen on their first day, on their first week. What are the first things he's going to be working on going to be. Hiring manager call, you don't underestimate it. The hiring manager probably won't want to do it, but when you see the conversion rates go up, it's definitely worth doing. And lastly, ask the candidate to refer candidates. Nothing is going to make them feel more part of the company than actually doing work for the company. So tell them about some of the positions that you're working on, and actively get them referring candidates, and make them feel like they are already working for the company and already actively participating in initiatives with the company. And a lot of this might seem like hard work. There's a lot of things there. It takes a lot of time to organize these things. Well, get an HR system that can handle it for you. All of this can be automated, actually, from keeping them warm to painting pictures, welcome emails, buddy messages, hiring manager calls, referring candidates. All of this can be automated, especially if you've got an HR system like BrioHR, which has a fantastic onboarding system. You simply program it for what you want to do and configure it the way you want to do it. And then for every candidate that signs an offer letter, you just put them into the process, and all these things are done automatically. So actually, it's really not a lot of work to do if you have the systems to do it. Great. Keep your successful candidates close, but your rejected candidates closer. Why would you do this? And for me, it's simple. Your successful candidates are always going to be close. They're going to be joining. Uh, they're going to be part of the company, and they're going to be referring candidates and helping you out. But actually, if you look at how many candidates you bring on board to the company compared to how many candidates you actually interview, the sheer number of candidates you interview is huge, and 99% of them actually don't get the job. But that 99% is a huge resource for you. Um, if I look back at my career and think about who has helped me the most, it's often been the candidates that I treated really well. Even though they didn't get the job, I treated them really well. I made them feel very, very welcome. I made them feel like they were very, very important. And then when I've needed favors, when I've needed referrals, when I've needed contacts in their company, hey, guess who are the first people to help me out? Um, Guess who are the first people to share my LinkedIn posts, to share open jobs, to give me contacts, give me referrals, and help me out when I need it. It's more often than not, it's candidates who didn't make it, but candidates who I made feel super, super important. And if you just look at, again, the sheer number of candidates you reject, um, they're a massive resource to you. So it's very, very important to keep your rejected candidates close. Make sure that you are giving them constant feedback. Make sure you are giving them reasons that they didn't make it. I've in the past, when I was a younger, more inexperienced recruiter, I didn't used to do that. I used to just carelessly leave candidates hanging, not give them feedback, and more and more cases happened when I regretted it. I moved to a new company, and I'm hiring for the same role, and I think, hey, that candidate who I rejected for another role, he would be perfect. And then that person doesn't want to talk to me because I gave them such a bad experience. It happens over and over again. So keep your rejected candidates as close as possible. They will be a massive resource for you, whether it's in your current company or future companies. Build those positive relations. You never know when you might need a favor. So do as many favors as possible for others. Okay, so if talking about keeping your rejected candidates closer, what about your actual team? Don't let your team die. So in these times, a lot of people are starting to work remotely, and they're not used to it. Whole companies are working remotely, and it's very difficult to keep that team dynamic going and to really stay aligned with your team and what everyone's doing. So it's very important to bring a new kind of structure to how you work, and make sure that everyone is okay and that everyone knows what direction they're going in. So you need to plan daily team calls, and daily might seem too much, but actually in recruitment, even when I'm working in the office, I try and have daily catch-ups with my entire recruitment team just to get an understanding of where everyone is and what everyone's pain points are. So you really need to talk about going through your roles one by one. How many CVs have been sent? How many interviews have been arranged? How many offers they've got? What roles are you struggling with? What problems are you facing? And giving each other solutions to those problems. It's no use just going through it. You really have to understand it and understand the issues and problems and really start solving each other's problems. It's super good for relieving tension. Recruitment is a stressful role, even when you're doing it well. It's super stressful, so you need to have some kind of team around you or support that can help you relieve that tension. And it helps to reinforce the culture. I've spoken a lot about culture previously. If you're in such a silo, you don't have a culture. So you need to have these daily team calls and really help reinforce the culture that you do have. And ultimately, you need to help each other. It's not easy working from home, and working in isolation. Whether it's helping each other on the roles and on the responsibilities you have for your job, or with personal things. If you are a team, you should care about each other and you should look out for each other. And that doesn't just extend to your work life, it goes into personal life as well. And when you're in isolation, people don't have their friends around them to look out for them. And sometimes they do just need a shoulder to cry on. So make sure you have these team talks, whether they're the whole team or one-on-ones. They really make a huge difference. And you know what? You shouldn't just limit it to your own team. Periodically, you should invite other members of the HR team. You don't know if their manager is doing the same. And you should also sometimes invite your hiring managers, just so they can sit in and understand where you are with the recruitment process. But also don't underestimate the social need that people have, and it's great to get as many people on these calls as possible, and as many people benefiting from these calls as possible. You are an ambassador of the culture yourself, so make sure you are a good ambassador. This is one of my favorite subjects. What does a recruiter do when there is no recruitment to do? And it's true, right now there's so many companies have completely frozen recruitment, and you're left with these recruitment teams who don't have any roles to work on. So what do you do in these kind of times? And my answer to that is literally everything else. As much as I talk about the importance of a culture playbook, of having these advanced HR systems like applicant tracking systems and onboarding systems, and creating amazing employer branding, it's really hard. There's just never enough time. Recruiters are so focused on fulfilling the roles. There's hardly ever any time to really do these things which will genuinely make their life easier in the future. The branding, the coming up with new recruitment processes, etc., etc., etc. There's never any time to do it, except now, right? This should be an amazing time for recruiters who have had their roles frozen, being able to focus everything, their whole day, on looking into how we can define the culture, into employer branding, etc., etc. So really come up with an action plan of what you want to achieve. What are you going to do in this time when there is not actually much recruitment to do? Write it down, clear it with your bosses, make sure they know what you're working on, make sure they know the value of what you're working on, and how it's going to massively impact recruitment in the future once the hiring freezes up. So what are you going to do when there's no recruitment to do? Hey, literally everything else. Yay, this is the last thing I'm going to be talking about today, and it's the best thing. It's about share the love always. That it's a really tough time for a lot of people at the moment. They're breadwinners for their family, and they're losing their jobs. They're being made redundant. Already, I'm getting tons of messages via LinkedIn every day, just people sending me their CVs, people saying they've lost their jobs and they need to get a salary coming in quickly. And I do my very, very best to help them. I don't have the positions in my own company to be able to help them, but I'm doing my absolute best to pass their CVs on, to share them with other people that I know. And as I said before, when I'm talking about pull factors, nothing will give you more satisfaction as a recruiter than knowing that you've found someone a job, and you've helped the breadwinner of the family get back into employment. You can fill all the positions in the company that you want, but nothing will get you more happiness and satisfaction than knowing that you've truly helped someone and made someone happy. So we are in a unique position as recruiters right now. We are the gatekeepers in a way. We are the ones that have the positions and the vacancies, and we should be doing as much as possible to help those people who are less fortunate than ourselves. And if you believe in karma, I don't believe in karma, but I do like to keep the karma bank topped up just in case. And it really does make a difference. These people that you help are again, they're going to be the ones that support you in the future. These people that you help out of very difficult situations when there's seemingly no advantage in it for you, you're just doing it out of the goodness of your own heart. These are the people that are going to support you later when you need a really big favor. When something bad happens to you, guess who's going to come out of the woodwork? It's going to be the people that you've helped. It's going to be the people that you found jobs for, and it's going to be the people that you've saved them from very tough situations. So do what you can. It's a tough time for everyone. Make sure you share the love.